covering the Federal Reserve for us. Let's bring in now Shana Sissel, Banríon Capital Management founder and CEO. And Shana, there's a lot of economic data this morning, some of it pretty delayed. How closely are you watching this data, and how important is it to you?
Well, obviously, I'm watching the data. Data like this is always important because it informs the Federal Reserve on what their decisions will be in the future. But it is delayed. It is somewhat warped by the fact that it is data that's coming in from the third quarter during the government shutdown. There's some, as you pointed out, zeroing that's going on in there that isn't reflective of reality. And so you got to take it with a grain of salt. And as you also pointed out, it's backward looking, so it doesn't tell us much about the future. You got to look at more of the leading indicators like consumer sentiment and things of that nature, which are better than expected, but still, not great. And so all of those things have to be kind of put together in a mosaic to figure out where we're going in the future, because the past is great to tell us where we were, but it's not really helpful in determining how things play out from here.
Shana, I know that you concentrate on alternative investments, but I'm curious as to what you look at in the public markets for signals of what's to come. So do you look at crypto, for example, which has had a wild ride just this last 2 days? Do you look at the VIX? I mean, what are those signals?
Well, crypto to me is an alternative. I mean, it might trade in the public markets, but it's an alternative asset class. So yeah, we pay attention to it. It's in terms of looking at signals overall, though, in the public markets, you're just looking for overall sentiment, volatility. You want to look at the options markets since they're an indicator of what goes on in the future. I've never really felt the VIX was a good reflection of actual true volatility. I'd rather look at the options markets for that. I know the VIX is somewhat based on that, but you just really want to pay attention to what people think are going to happen in the future. And sentiment's a good way of doing that. Looking at momentum signals is a good way to do that. We've seen some stepping back from those future trends, AI, robotics, things of that nature. Some of those stocks have come back. To me, that's a signal that people are a little concerned about the future. If anything, that makes me a little more bullish on some of those names. But overall, that's what I'm paying attention to. And the volatility of the data is something I'm also paying attention to, because there's not a lot of data that suggests that we have a poor economy here. But there is volatility within that data, a lot of restating previous data points, previous time periods. A lot of the data is conflicting in some ways, again, taking with a grain of salt because it's through the government shutdown. But nonetheless, those are the kinds of things I pay attention to when I'm looking at how I would put together and position a portfolio going forward.
Well, and valuations, right? I mean, you point out, Shana, that after the recent sell-off that we saw in the big AI tech companies, you really haven't seen multiple expansion. So do you continue to buy those? Do you put additional capital to work there?
Yeah, I mean, those are definitely things you'd be looking at. There hasn't been multiple expansion, but there should be. And when it comes to valuations, the actual number is less important than the direction and the expansion of that number. So as you pointed out, we haven't seen a lot of multiple expansion in a lot of these names. And that, to me, is a buy signal. Again, as long as you're not seeing multiples shrink, they're kind of staying stagnant. You're not necessarily seeing the expansion that you would expect. To me, that would be a buying signal. And again, when you look at a lot of people like to try to compare today's period to the tech bubble, like 99, 2000. One of the things you saw then that you're not seeing now, but would be on my radar screen, is if these companies started to restate their earnings outlook and bring them down or miss more frequently. Those things would be my concern of a potential bubble burst, but we're not seeing that. So it's very hard for me to kind of get behind the whole we're in a bubble argument because the actual evidence behind it and the valuations, the multiples and the earnings outlooks aren't suggesting that these companies are concerned. I do think that's somewhat of a psychological thing. I think that a lot of senior executives in a lot of these companies have decided to under promise and over deliver. But I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing for markets in terms of being able to keep us out of bubble territory.
Shana, thank you so much for all of that this morning. This is Shana Sissel of Banríon Capital Management. Let's get a check on those